All right, we'll get started here. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Crystal Harris. I am the Alumni Relations Manager and a graduate from the class of 2015. I'd like to welcome you guys to the Loyal Hearts Business Forum tonight, 2021 Economic Risks and Opportunities. A few housekeeping items before we begin. If you haven't already, make sure to drop your name and your job in the chat below. If you're an alum, shout out to all my alums out there, put your class year. We really encourage you guys to continue conversations after the event and just continue building your networks. In addition, we'd love to have this be a conversation. So don't be afraid to put a question or a comment in the chat. Again, definitely wanting to have that dialogue, and we'll also be opening up questions at the end. So stay tuned for that. And lastly, I just want to give a shout out to our Loyal Hearts Business Forum Committee for their ideas, helping us find our speakers for tonight and their input during tonight's event. And lastly, I want to give a quick thank you to Jim Mitchell for stepping in and taking the time to be our moderator this evening. Jim is from the class of 77, and he's the owner of Mitchell Marketing Management. He also helps St. Viator as the marketing and communication specialist. So with that, I will hand it over to Jim to get us started. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Crystal, and welcome to everyone tonight. One of the great things about these events are the networking opportunities, and I just want to give a quick shout out. I see a couple of our panelists from our last session, Jerry Cataldo and Steve Zaleski, who are here. So nice to see them returning to be a part of the conversation, and certainly want to wish Jennifer Culhane well. Normally this would be her role. She's a little under the weather, so best wishes to Jen, get her back on her feet quickly. Tonight, great topic as we begin the new year, 2021 economic risks and opportunities. We're going to look at it from both a corporate and individual level, and we have an outstanding panel to help us tonight. I'd like to introduce them now. Sheila Steiger is the Vice President of Global Talent Acquisition at AbbVie. She has been in the field of human resources and talent acquisition for more than 20 years. Sheila has worked at Fortune 100 companies in medical device, consumer goods, pharma industries, in markets across the globe. And as you heard a moment ago, she's a fan of the snow. She splits her time between here and Vail, along with her husband, Ed, who is an alum. 2 teenagers and 3 dogs, where she enjoys skiing out there, sailing here, and supporting her kids in their athletic activities. Is a member of our class of 1989. So Sheila, first of all, welcome to you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely great. A familiar face for those of you involved in the Alumni Association is Jim Platania. Jim, of course, earned his CPA and worked for a number of years at KPMG before joining his father as a certified financial planner and wealth management advisor at Platania Financial. And if you are in the Arlington Heights area, you're probably very familiar with their building in the center of downtown. Jim helps clients create financial goals, fund plans, ultimately align their values with their money. Outside of work, boating, traveling, playing basketball, beach volleyball are all things you'll find Jim doing. And he's serving this year as chairperson of the alumni board. So Jim, a member of the class of 08, thanks for taking the time to share your thoughts tonight.
Thanks, Jim. Glad to be here.
And I'm pleased to welcome Tom Southall. Tom is a retired executive who spent his career at Illinois Tool Works, ITW, began in sales and worked his way to national marketing director. And most recently at his retirement was vice president of global innovation construction products. Great background in strategic plans and successful implementation thereof. He has studied, taught, and practiced leadership at a number of levels, highly involved with a lot of not-for-profit organizations, great volunteer, and he's an avid cyclist. You'll see he and his wife out throughout the summer and actually year-round. Also reads, hikes, and a proud father of 2 St. Viator alum, former chairperson of our board of trustees. And Tom, I really appreciate your time tonight.
Hey, thanks, Jim.
So let's dive in. And again, we want your questions as the night goes on, but I'm going to start with a few here. And I think I'll start, Sheila, with you as head of AbbVie's Global Talent Acquisition Group. COVID had a big impact all across the board in 2020. shifting workforces. What do you see right now are the differences between how, physical workplace and human resources are being impacted in the U.S.?
Well, physical and human are being impacted. I mean, I think the biggest one, we touched upon it a little bit when we were just chatting before the session started. But I think the biggest one, and probably the most obvious, is that most people are not actually in the workplace. And so it has created this opportunity for us to not only learn how to work differently, but how to interact and maintain those relationships with the people that we work with differently. And through that experience, I think we've learned a lot more about the people that we work with. I think there's a lens of empathy that has been instilled in many people in this situation. And I also think there's been an adoption of technology where technology maybe wasn't being used as much. I can just speak to my own experience, having come from an organization that was so advanced when it came to technology, and moving to an organization that was getting there. And the difference that this pandemic has made on people really adopting technology as well. So I think the key piece when you talk about human and workplace is making sure that people really are leaning in and using the tools to maintain those relationships and develop new ones.
As we look at changes brought by COVID 2020 into 21, Tom, I had the pleasure of hearing you speak today earlier, and I know you're a strong proponent of strategic planning at various levels. But one of the things I heard you mention today was, being able to adapt and change, and certainly that had huge impact in the past year. Where should people be right now at a corporate level in terms of being able to establish a plan for what the future might be near term?
Well, I think undoubtedly it has to be more of the same. While there's certainly reasons for optimism that will be, more in person, there's really no certainty around that. I think to build off what Sheila said and what I would be thinking about in terms of my flexibility as a leader now, this is a really great time to develop a next level of leadership and not just carry the same skills that you used when you could walk into somebody's office or get on a plane and go see them. But managing somebody remotely, no matter what, is difficult. And in the current times, it's exceedingly difficult. So learning how to deal with that, learning how to let them balance their work-life issues at home with children at home and everything, I think requires a lot of flexibility. And in organizations, the best leaders will use this as a time to get better.
I promised at the beginning we would look at both corporate and personal views on this. So Jim Platania, I want to turn to you. Did you see a significant change in 2020 in terms of people doing financial planning, worrying about retirement planning, and were there a lot of things that your industry had to take on in a hurry to adapt to that?
Yeah, thank you, Jim. And before I answer, I have to get out my disclosures for keep my friends at compliance happy. This is intended as general information and not specific advice. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. You cannot invest directly in an index. 2020, as we know, was really a crazy year in a lot of aspects of our lives. But the stock market was certainly no different. And our industry, definitely had to adapt. Obviously, we're not seeing people. And, realistically, 95% of the population had to find a way to live their lives on the internet. They had to find lawyers on the internet and doctors and financial planners. So, we obviously had to adjust, but communication was so vital for us in 2020. 2020, just to sort of recap the stock market, it was one of the most volatile years ever. And we haven't seen a 20% decline since 2009. In 2020, we saw a 34% top to bottom decline in the S&P 500. It took 22 trading days for the market to fall 30%. That is the fastest ever that the market has fallen 30%, even dating back to the Great Depression. We had the second and fifth worst days in the history of the Dow Jones. The Dow fell 13% on March 16th in one day. So point being, it was a lot of volatility. And we had to make sure we're reaching out to clients and really letting them know what was going on and how it pertained to their accounts. And then what happened at the end of March? Astonishing, out of nowhere, the market started to turn around. They started to move up through the uncertainty of the pandemic, through the government lockdowns and 15% unemployment, through civil unrest and the George Floyd protest and the election. And here we are. I mean, we're close to all-time highs. Today was down a bit. But I think it really reiterates the importance of having good behavior as an investor. And for someone that was patient and disciplined and stuck to their plan, they ultimately ended up seeing a positive year in the stock market. The S&P finished the year up around 18% last year, including dividends. So investment behavior was certainly a key in 2020.
Jim, is that a hard thing for investors to do when there's so much volatility, to understand the long-term play and try and be wise and not be too reactionary?
I would say absolutely. We're all emotional. Humans. We're hardwired. See them through retirement, ideally. And when it's your retirement savings that are invested in the stock market or the bond market, and probably some mix of the two, it can get very emotional. And I think it's best to try your best to keep those emotions from affecting your portfolio investment decisions, as hard as that is.
One of the things, obviously, I mentioned that comes with financial planning is planning for retirement. And there's just a completely different view of that today. Tom, you stand out as an example of one of those people who started with a big company and stayed your entire career. I know that's becoming much less frequent and common now. As someone who spent time in leadership, how do you evaluate the job market today? Not so much the market, but the way in which employees are moving. How does that help or hurt companies in terms of developing and retaining talent?
I think overall it helps both the employee and the company. It helps the employee because, when I started to work, the kind of theme was find a good company and stick with it, no matter what. And so you had people that had really suboptimal careers that thought they had to stay there. You had companies tolerating suboptimal employees because that's just the way it went. So greater movement puts more people in the workforce. The larger the population, the more talent there is. Companies not making this kind of lifelong commitment, if you will, also frees them to manage their talent more effectively. So I think the greater movement is good for both parties. The one thing that I would add is movement for the sake of movement is not a good thing. People should change jobs, or they should move, or companies should make a change because there's going to be an improvement in performance, or for the employee, there's going to be an improvement in ability to learn and further their skills.
Sheila, I'm going to do a quick plug here for our upcoming alumni magazine, Alliant for Life magazine. I had the opportunity to do an interview with alum Jim Fruchterman, who is very visible out in Silicon Valley, and his companies use technology for good. And we were talking about young employees today, about things like DEI and social consciousness. And he feels that employees are driving companies to be more socially conscious. They want to work for those kind of companies. And if companies aren't fitting that need, employees are not looking at them or moving on. As you look at talent acquisition today, are younger people and social issues really driving how companies have to adapt?
There's a lot of truth in that. Frankly, I think it is younger generations, but it's not just younger generations. And, I would also say, a lot of the way that we operate, my organization, my team, is everything is founded in data. That's kind of where we start. And so kind of linked to your question, I'll just share with you an example of one of the things that I do with my team on an annual basis is launch research to understand what's important to talent. Corporate social responsibility is important to talent, but the research has also shown us that it's a baseline expectation. So if an organization doesn't have a strong corporate social responsibility strategy, most individuals aren't going to rank that organization as one of their top, an organization that they really want to be a part of, which of course is what you want. for talent when you're looking for them. The study that I launched last year, we gathered more than 10,000 insights. And what we did was reach out to talent across the globe to understand what's important to you when you think of a top of mind employer. What's your perception of, in my instance, AbbVie as being able to deliver on that? And then we layered on top the truth. And the truth comes from your employee engagement surveys in internal focus groups. And so that's where we learned one of the key indicators that CSR is a baseline of expectation. How do we go about attracting this talent and continuing to retain the talent are the other what we call talent attributes. And it's understanding what's important to the talent, really listening and paying attention, and then looking at ourselves to determine, are we not only delivering on that, but are we exceeding those expectations? Because that's how you attract the talent, and that's how you retain the talent as well.
And thank you for both of you. I'm certainly enjoying the conversation, but I want to encourage others to jump in via chat. Just drop your question in and we'll do our best to get to them. Jim, coming back to you, we've talked to Sheila and Tom, who have experience with very large companies. I know you deal with a lot of small business owners, and as they look at how their companies are evolving, what about succession planning? Are there things that people are starting to worry a little bit more about now in their retirement and financial planning if they have a business, and what should they be considering in terms of making a good succession plan?
I think 2020 just drove home the point that the future is uncertain and anything can happen. And when you talk succession planning and estate planning, you never know when an accident is going to take place, when a premature death is going to take place, or a disability. So doing the right things now while things are calm before a major event does take place, it's just smart. Just on succession planning and estate planning as a whole, oftentimes a new administration comes in, and a lot of the laws that sort of dictate a lot of the estate planning and succession planning documents change. Lifetime gift exemptions, for example. So it's just very important to review your estate planning, succession planning documents, every couple years. And if you don't have them in place, it's never too late to start.
And January is always one of those times where everyone makes their resolutions, and many of those are financial. As a new year begins here, Jim, I mean, how would you recommend people or businesses really set and follow their financial plans?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in the investing world, there is so much out there, and it's really important to determine what you can control and what is outside of your control. No one has a crystal ball. Market returns are for the most part outside of our control. So are tax policy and laws and regulations. So we're not going to spend as much energy focusing on those things. What you can control are things like how much you spend, how much you save, and then your asset allocation. And especially on the first two, which sort of go hand in hand. It's not about what you make, it's about what you keep. And spending is such a big component of that. Now, in terms of savings rate, it's something that's overlooked. I think a lot of people want to jump into the exciting parts of constructing an investment portfolio and talking about value stocks and growth stocks and small cap and mid cap. But when it comes down to it, you really need to be doing the basics, and improving your savings rate, what you're actually keeping, will go a really long way into helping you pursue your financial goals. And then, of course, asset allocation. So, within your 401k, within your IRA or your taxable accounts, how are you positioned? Typically, between stocks, bonds, and cash. And I think to start the year, I think it's a really good idea just to review some of those things. Your asset allocation really should be, it really should match your risk tolerance and your time horizon. And it's really important that you do those things, because when we see a big market downturn like we saw last year, it's really important that your risk tolerance matches how you're actually invested.
Tom, you obviously worked on a global scale, and I'll actually refer back to our conversation on our last Loyal Hearts Business Forum. And if I remember correctly, as Jerry Cataldo was talking and Steve Zaleski about how many people in the entertainment industry, restaurants, hotels were hurt, but it almost was going to provide some opportunities for growth once we return in terms of ability to buy or merge. Right now, as you look globally at corporations, Tom, is this a good time for smart companies to be looking for acquisitions, and what should they be evaluating under these circumstances?
Well, I think it's a good time, but it's also a very difficult time. To have gotten through 2020 and through the rest of this, there are companies that are going to have had to burn through a bunch of cash, maybe take on more debt than they're normally doing or comfortable with to get through it. And it's going to put them in a very difficult position to come back once the market starts to show life. Now, having said that, that while that might make it an acquisition target, I don't think there's ever been a time in my professional life where the market segment was more critical. Some market segments are going to come back faster than others. Some are going to come back very slowly over a long period of time, and you'd have to have a very well thought out forecast of that market segment before you dove into an acquisition, because you're going to pay for the money, you're going to pay the money for the business. And if it's in a segment that's going to take a very long time to come back out of, it might not be a good move at that time.
Sheila, what does that do when companies are having a hard time? I'm sure employees get skittish. There's rumors of mergers. Sometimes they happen. Talk to us about your process of evaluating employees in a merger, and just for anyone out there working now, what should they be looking for a move in the next year or so, or is this just a good time to sit tight?
Yeah, interesting that you should ask the question, because my organization just recently completed a $60 billion acquisition, largest acquisition certainly that I've ever been exposed to. And through that acquisition, the evaluation of talent, we relied a lot on the organization that we acquired. And so some of the conversations that we've had earlier today around succession planning, there was a couple of mentions of talent management, how important that is. And what you look for, what I look for, it's more from a success profile versus a traditional profile. And what I mean by success profile is skills, knowledge, and experience that people can bring to the organization that have potential to be future leaders. So you're not looking for people that just fit into a job that have growth well beyond that. Also individuals that have the capability to span across, whether it's multiple functional areas or different types of roles. So think finance to HR to sales. That's how you create, in my opinion, a really great general manager. So that's the first part of your question. The second part of your question, I think, was essentially, do I think it's a good time for people to be looking? I always think it's a good time for people to be networking, which is why I applaud anybody that's on here tonight, because it all starts from networking. Once you've made the decision that, gosh, I'm not happy where I am anymore, and so I'm going to start a search, you're already 2 steps behind, and that's a reactive mode. We live in a world that has changed so much, in large part due to technology. It's made it a lot easier to network with people. But the more that you keep those networks alive, the easier it is when you're ready to make that move. I do think that there's going to be, over the course of the next several years, there's going to be some industries, and I think, Tom already highlighted it, that you're going to see some job growth. We're already seeing it in healthcare, right? We're seeing it in transportation and manufacturing. Interestingly enough, I was reading a report last week, and I was surprised to see that there's been a 15% growth in the financial and business administration industry, which I wasn't expecting. On the flip side, I was reading a McKinsey report a couple of weeks ago, and in the McKinsey report, it shared that they don't expect industries, the consumer-facing industries, to really rebound until 2025. So airlines, entertainment, et cetera. So to answer your question, it depends on what it is that you're wanting to accomplish, where you're wanting to go. And the key takeaway from my answer to your question is always network.
Crystal, I don't know if you've got the control on letting people speak, but I do have a couple of questions coming in, and I'm going to ask folks to jump in and ask those now. And Dave Hogaboom, you had raised one a minute ago too. So why don't you fire away and ask what you had in mind here?
Yeah, this comes from, I have a daughter who graduated from Wisconsin last year. She took a job over at Grainger. She took a job at Grainger, but she's been working from home here. And, there are times when she's wondering, is she doing the right job? Is she, she doesn't feel like she's part of a family because she hasn't been there to be able to meet people and, network, interact, have lunch with people. So it's really a mixed bag of feelings. I feel sorry for her. And she's wondering if she's doing the right stuff. Are people questioning her work? So Sheila, I was throwing that at you because you probably have the same, you're probably dealing with the same situation. So, and I'm sure there's some people on here who might be new to roles in companies that might have the same issue.
Yeah. I mean, it's real. I've got, frankly, a lot of people on my team that started in March, and I've hired a lot of people. I mean, I just referenced this acquisition, massive acquisition where I have team members from around the world that I've never met face to face other than video. I've never met them literally live in person. And yet I started working with them, on this acquisition and integration, gosh, like last June, maybe. So it's tough. And so, if you're asking me for advice for your daughter, which is kind of what I'm gleaning from your question, there's a couple things. The first one is for her to, not be afraid to really lean in and ask the questions. A lot of it does depend on not only your manager, but the team. And so, I can appreciate somebody new in career, maybe second guessing, should I be reaching out? Absolutely, yes. Initiative is huge. That's what we look for in leaders. So taking the initiative and building her network is the best thing that she can do for herself. Continuing to reach out and have conversations not only with her supervisor, but with her team members. Start sharing a little bit more about what she's doing, but also ask. That curiosity factor is huge. People love to talk about themselves. People love to share what they're working on, especially when they're really excited and passionate. So if she takes the initiative to, I'm just trying to build my network in this remote world, and I'd love to learn more about what it is that you do, that's that first step. And the more that she does it, the more natural it will happen. Now, there's also a reality, Dave, that maybe Grainger's not the right place for her culturally. I'm not suggesting that it is or is not, but I would encourage her to, instead of thinking, this might not be right, invest first, assess, and continue to network in and outside of the organization.
Let me, I want to jump around here. A couple of things lined up. Matt O'Malley, you've got a question. I'm going to get to you in a minute. Jim Platini, I have something I want to ask you, but Tom, real quick, you want to follow up on what Sheila said, because we were talking about that before the forum started here.
Yeah, I mentioned before the forum that companies, the two things they're struggling with the most is keeping the culture going and talent management, which, to some extent go to Dave's issue. I think Sheila gave excellent advice here on building your network. That would always be good advice. But right now, I think you have to be really careful that you don't let your interactions with your coworkers be limited to very tactical Zoom meetings, because that's not what would happen in the office. You'd run into each other in the hall or at the coffee station. So my advice would be that she do what Sheila said and find reasons to interact with people that aren't around a meeting or a specific topic. Get to know them. Hear stories about Grainger. That's where you really get a smell for the culture, and meet other people and just have some more, some combo social business interactions with people, I think would be a good idea.
And Jim, Tom, I want to take the example of Dave's daughter. When we talk about financial planning, I think young employees, maybe they jump in the company 401k and that's about it. But in your business, what would you say to someone who is just out of school in terms of starting to think about retirement already?
Well, I would say that it's on you now. And going back a few decades, when a lot of employers had pensions, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the employer primarily helped set aside funds that the employee could then use upon retirement and then the years that follow. And in 1978, the 401k was created. And the 401k, I think, is a really fantastic investment vehicle. But the 401k, it essentially took the burden off of the employer, and it put the burden of saving for retirement on the employee. So it's up to employees, and the amount of people that don't know what they're putting into the 401k. They don't know how it's being allocated. They don't really check it. And don't get me wrong, people are busy. Like everyone has, their day-to-day activities, but ultimately it's on you to save for your retirement. And, to spend maybe 1 hour a month overlooking your accounts and looking at your 401k, just to make sure you're doing the right things at a young age. And, you have potentially 30 or 40 years to let that 401k continue to grow and compound tax deferred. It's really smart just to take a look at those things early on in a young person's career.
Thank you, Jim. And we touched briefly on DEI a couple of minutes ago. And Matt O'Malley, I know you had a question you want to jump in. So you want to state that one for us? Got you on mute there, Matt. Let's try again. No. Okay, Matt's having an audio issue, it sounds like. All right, Matt, raise your hand when you're ready to come back. We'll try and get you squared away there. So let's just kind of jump back a little bit and continue on with the conversation here. Tom, as you kind of look at where corporations have evolved and what really has become a global economic approach in many cases, based on evolution of the last few years, the way things have gone, where do you see kind of the U.S. today in terms of operating within the global economy? And are there any issues or concerns that come to mind for you?
Wow. Okay. Well, I think, first of all, when I think about our position globally, I have to start with a disclaimer is that I'm not a fan of tariffs. I think tariffs are an outdated, crude instrument that don't have a home in the high-tech global economy that we live in. So the reason I say that is because we're going to have to see the impact of the really significant amount of tariffs that we've had here for the past few years and what those mean kind of going forward. And they'll be good and they'll be bad. One thing I think that's been good about it is I'm also not a big fan of moving manufacturing overseas for labor costs. I think it's fool's gold. So you've got businesses now, thanks to the tariffs, that have rethought this and have realized that between transportation and inventory investment and problems with supply lines, that they really need more control over their supply. And that being able to get quality products into the customer's hands in a timely fashion is not worth compromising for a small amount. So I think we're going to have to see on that. Meanwhile, the data shows that we continue to sink in the trade balance. We're at the lowest level we've been in over 25 years. And I've long been a proponent of the solution to that is we've got to have more innovation. We need to have more innovative products in particular, but products and services that bring value to other countries. And we've slipped a long way in that area.
I appreciate that, Tom. Thank you. And I again encourage people to drop questions into the chat. And we've been talking about some major companies, kind of global scale operations. But I know we have some people on the call here who are in nursing and physical therapy and jobs that require you to be on site every day. So if you have questions about changes in your world or want to make comments, I'd love to have you drop those in here and share them with us. We can kind of cover those as well. Sheila, one of the things that Crystal has been doing this year is working with alumni to set up mentoring programs to help career guidance for some of our current students and those in college starting careers. What's the view on mentoring these days, particularly since people are working from home? Is that still a valuable tool that has life, or is that something that has really been damaged?
Yeah, no, I absolutely think it's a valuable tool that still has life. I may have a different view than other people on the call here, so certainly feel free to chime in and share your views. But my view on mentorship is It's much more successful when it's organic and natural versus you're joining the organization and I'm going to assign you this mentor, and the two of you develop your relationship and take it to wherever you want to take it. And certainly there's more structure in informal mentorship programs. But I am a believer, and I get it. I'm a born and raised recruiter, so I enjoy reaching out and having conversations with people. But I am a believer that the natural organic relationships are where you really learn, where you're comfortable sharing your vulnerabilities with somebody, and they are very comfortable being open and transparent with you. That's how you learn. And when you're set up sometimes with a mentor, that whether they're a peer of yours or superior, sometimes you just lose that level of comfortness that prevents you from having those transparent conversations. So I'll just share my own personal. I have a mentor. He was a boss of mine years ago. And I still talk to him very frequently. Whenever I'm struggling, I call him. I call him for fun too. But when I'm really struggling with something, I call him because I know I'm going to get sage, honest, great advice. So I'm a big believer in it. And I think they absolutely still have legs.
Tom, you want to share anything there?
Yeah, I have a little different spin on that. I agree with Sheila's, if you force it, there may not be a good chemistry there or a good fit. I think you got to be careful with the organic. It needs supervision because people can pick somebody they're comfortable with, but if that person's not a good coach or a good mentor, they can end up getting together for coffee and talking about what they did on the weekend, not necessarily true mentoring. And I know she talked about adding diligence and oversight, which would help with that. So I think it's a combo. I think if you're going to arrange the mentoring, you have to pick people that are, we all know people like this, people that are kind of proven mentors that have done it and have a track record of helping people move along. But I still wouldn't force somebody. I would say, hey, so-and-so has worked with people where you are in your career before and had a lot of success. Would you be open to that? So I think it's somewhere kind of in between.
And Jim, tell me about your journey, because you started KPMG, a very large consulting firm, spent some time there, then you moved to a family business. If you were talking to a young student, a young career, someone with young aspirations, would you recommend that they jump into a big company, get some experience as opposed to working small, or does it matter?
I really like the big corporate setting, and working in public accounting. It's always something different. You can be on one engagement or a project 1 week, another engagement the following week, different teams, different people. Sheila mentioned the importance of network. I mean, connections that you make throughout your career, you just never know when you see these people again. And I think just in networking, just a comment on just networking as a whole, I feel like a lot of people think networking is, what can this person do for me? Really, networking is looking to make connections for others and going out of your way to do things for other people without really any sort of, you're not keeping score. You're just really bringing positivity. I think you do that enough in long-term relationships, and I think things just tend to work out typically.
And I'd love to ask a little bit, and I think you have all experienced this in some degree, but we've talked about changes at the employee level post-COVID. There also seems to be the potential exodus out of cities. We seem to have moved in and out of the suburbs, back to the city. Companies are moving frequently. Talk a little bit about what the crystal ball says for each of you in terms of what the major company is going to look like a few years from now. Are they going to be dispersed? Are they going to circle around the big cities again, or just not know how things are going to settle down?
I think you're going to see, a little bit of both. I mean, we've all seen, Oracle has made that bold statement. They're leaving Silicon Valley.
Mm-hmm.
Tesla's leaving Southern California. We've seen Twitter come out, with their CEO saying, remote workforce for an undetermined amount of time. And I just don't think that we know, but I do think we're going to see a little bit of both. I think, I don't know, my view on that, when you take a look at, are we going to add real estate, pop up a new office somewhere, the first thing you start with is what's the end in mind? What is it that we're trying to accomplish? And work your way backwards from there as to, should we be relocating? Should we be popping up elsewhere? Your pop-up shops, you have those now in large organizations, or the remote workforce. So I think it remains to be seen, but I would venture to guess it's going to be a little bit of both.
I think you're going to, I agree with that. I think you're going to see two other things, is that companies that are downtown today that maybe have 12 floors of offices in a high rise, in a few years, they're going to have 8 or something. Because they're going to have figured out they can operate with less real estate, and that their employees want to work from home a certain number of days a week. And they've shown that they can do that and be productive. I think the other outcome you'll see of that is that if I only need to be in the office 2 or 3 days a week, I'm willing to live further away from where I work. So there's a good chance the suburbs in cities like Chicago will get bigger. Because if you have to go into the office 5 days a week, then Park Ridge is a lot more attractive than Huntley. If you have to go in the office twice a week, now it's a little bit different.
The other thing that, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Jim.
Go ahead, Sheila.
The other thing I was going to add to that, it's a little related to what Tom said and a little unrelated to your question, Jim, but with a what we're experiencing right now. I'm sure many of us on the line here know people that are working, and they have either, if they have the luxury of a second home in a warm state, they're there. That's where they're working. Some people have made the decision to move because they know they can work remote now. And so as organizations haven't figured it out, but we're talking about it. And as they start to figure it out, that talent pool does open up, which can be really a really great thing for people.
And then even coming at this just from the lens of like a smaller business. So like our firm, for example, it's myself, my dad, my mom, who does our accounting and operations, and then we have a receptionist. We're a smaller business, 4 people. So the workforce question isn't as big of a consideration, but more so for businesses that are like hyper local, that really serve their community. It's going to be really astonishing to see how 2020 transforms so many of these potentially local businesses. Because like I said, people had no choice in 2020. They had to find a way to live on the internet. My grandma, who's 95, she would have never learned how to order groceries online. That would have never happened. She had to find a way to do it. And so I think the impact of that on like the very local small businesses is going to be something to watch. And it's actually a big opportunity as well. And I think it's just a good point that just because you're local and you sort of have your own, your own sort of niche in the community, you never know if someone on the other side of the country can come in and really take market share, because things are more digital now. So it's just something to watch for.
About 10 minutes left, so I'm going to just
Jim, I'd just like to add one thing to that really, really quick.
Sure, Tom.
What Sheila said about, people being remote now. So one of my volunteer work, I do coaching of people that are in career search. And so people like the people on Sheila's team that are hiring for opportunities, if they're hiring for a job in Denver, they're now looking at people from around the country because the job is being done remote. I have someone that I'm coaching that applied for a job in the UK that lives in Chicago because it's remote.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, who would have, 5 years ago, that would have been science fiction. Now, I don't know that that's going to stick, but that really changes things for both the employee and the employer.
Well, and
the flexibility that it offers is amazing. I mean, my husband and my son live in Vail, Colorado, because my son is a competitive snowboarder and is a sophomore in high school. So he's not old enough to be out there. And this remote workforce has allowed the two of them to move out there to pursue my son's dreams, probably my husband's too. But that flexibility, that's happening, it's happening so much now. That I do think it's a really great thing. It's affording companies the opportunity to expand their talent pool. If they're not going to relocate people, because today people are a little bit more bold in their choices. So I think there's a lot of merit to what you just said, Tom.
Well, that's why I want to talk with our last few minutes here. And again, I'll set aside questions for any of those on the call who want to enter some in the chat. We'll get to those. But we've talked about DEI. We've talked about the change from the old days of having a pension, from people staying with one company. Let's look ahead to what attracts employees. Benefits used to be salary, vacation, and insurance, and now there's workspace. There's telecommuting. There's providing free breakfast, having the gym in the building that people could access. What are the things that are going to drive employee retention and attraction in the future in terms of benefits beyond just what people are paid? Do you have a sense for where that might be and what we'd be looking at in the next couple of years?
Sure. I mean, I can chime in. Learning and development is a top priority for a large number of people. And so they're attracted to organizations and stay with organizations that invest in them. That is very closely correlated to career progression. Individuals want to work for organizations, I just said, that are going to invest in them. So it's a combination of learning, development, and career progression. They want to work for organizations that provide them challenging work. And they want to work for organizations that have that innovative pipeline, kind of that innovative component, because that leads again into that challenging work. And when organizations listen, I had said this earlier this evening, when you pay attention, you ask, what is important when you think of that top of mind employer where you really want to be? And you pay attention to that, you can identify some insights and then look at yourself as an organization, determine how well do we do at this? And if we really want to retain this top talent, do we need to change things? So listening.
Okay, Tom?
Well, I have a few things to say. I want to start with almost everything I wanted to say. Sheila just said and said it better than me. But what I would add is that I think it's the same at the core that it's always been. People want to have meaningful and rewarding work where they can know they can make a difference and they can see where they made a difference. They want the opportunity to learn and progress and grow and move along in their career. And they want to be adequately compensated along the way. Now, there's some other things today that are important to people, but at the core of it, people want to learn and grow and get better at what they do.
And Jim, as you work with people in terms of planning, financial planning and investments, what do you see them looking for in terms of their careers and what they get back from a company or what they can do to better themselves and prepare for their future?
Yeah, I mean, I think Tom made a really good point. And, it's not just for a lot of people, it's not just about a paycheck, it's about, purpose and really aligning, what you care about potentially. And I think when your employer can have similar views, I think that just makes the employee that much more bought in, and they're going to, possibly work harder and maybe care more about it.
What I'm going to do now is we're down to the last few minutes. I'm going to give each of our panelists a minute or so, kind of open forum here. I might ask, what's the one thing someone should take away from tonight, whether it's something we've discussed, something we didn't get to. If you had just this minute to share one nugget with everyone, what would that be so that they can walk away with a little bit of value? And Sheila, I'll start with you.
Okay. I already said it, so I'll repeat it and I'll use different words. Relationships matter. Invest in networking. I think that Jim did a really great job earlier of highlighting the importance of networking and the true intent, which is not, if I do this for you, you'll do that for me. It's networking for the sake of networking and developing relationships for the long haul.
Excellent. Tom?
Yeah, I've got a couple. I think one that we didn't touch on is, I think one of the learnings for me in 2020 is I don't need to go to as many baseball games and movies, and I don't need to go out to dinner as much. Not that I don't miss those things, but thanks to Zoom and thanks to the year, I've been in touch with friends and family members around the country that I never took the time to talk to before. And it's been very rewarding, and it's really caused me to pause and reflect on how I'm spending my time. It's been a very interesting outcome of 2020. The other thing I would say is kind of a summary, and it wraps up a couple of things around investing and changing jobs is, I think if it's a good time to change jobs for you right now, you should. I don't think you should change jobs just because it's 2021. And I don't think you should change your investment strategy unless that there's some data to the same. I wouldn't grossly overreact to the current circumstances.
Great.
I would actually make a comment really just on the economy as a whole. Obviously, this is, an economic panel. And, I think people also want to hear, about how does the economy look for 2021. And, I received a client call, maybe a few weeks ago, talking about the Biden-Harris administration and how will stocks potentially be for under President Biden. And I think that maybe we should focus on not so much who's in the White House, but where we are in the economic cycle. I mean, there's a very good chance that we are entering into an economic expansion. Obviously, we mentioned the vaccines and reopening the economy. You have stimulus. You have low interest rates, which are typically a boom for businesses and for individuals. You have all this pent up demand, right? We're all dying to go out and see our friends and family and go to restaurants and travel and all these things. I think the kicker that not a lot of people are talking about is the American consumer is in the best financial shape they've ever been in. And that is going to sound really crazy to people, right? I mean, we all know people that are struggling financially, and some of the industries have been hit really, really hard. But thinking about 2020, let's say income stayed the same, which actually income increased. Spending in 2020 fell off a cliff, right? No one was able to really spend much. As a result, personal savings rates skyrocketed. And so, you have a consumer that really wants to spend and is in the position to spend. And I think that's going to be a boom for the economy, consumers going out and increasing economic activity. And as a stock market investor, obviously no one has a crystal ball again, but you invest with the potential to share in the future profits of these underlying companies. And if they're growing their earnings, that typically is a factor in the stock market.
Great. Well, Jim, Tom, Sheila, thank you all so much for being a part of this tonight. Outstanding discussion and very valuable information. Your time means a lot to us. I want to thank you for contributing as you did tonight. I'm going to send it back to Crystal now to kind of wrap things up for us. But from my point of view, it's been a great night. And I appreciate everyone's time.
Thanks, Jim.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everyone.
All right. So before I let the Q&A begin, just wanted to put a final slide out there. But thank you so much for joining tonight. Special thanks to all the panelists and Jim for moderating tonight. If you guys enjoyed tonight's event and would like to continue supporting our Alumni Association and St. Viator, you can text the Business Forum to that number on the screen. But also please make sure to check out our upcoming alumni events. Feel free to screenshot this page if you'd like. It's very helpful if you guys want to. But you guys will also be receiving a post-event email shortly after we finish up here. And if you guys can take a couple minutes just to fill out a quick survey about tonight's event so we can improve for the future and make sure that we're exploring topics with the Loyal Hearts Business Forum that matter most to you guys. But I will stop sharing my screen and open up the panel to everyone else. Let me unmute you guys. All right. And so we can move on to the Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourselves and ask away.
I think, did I get my, can you hear me now? Did I get this sorted out?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So Sheila, I just had a question for you. Given the, the importance of DE&I now, particularly at large organizations, how has that changed the way that talent acquisition or management, like how you guys do your job? Or what are some of the things you're thinking about in your organization specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I think not just my organization. I mean, my gosh, since June, more than 1,600 CEOs in the United States have come out publicly with commitments on the investments they're going to make in ED&I. That's a pretty big number in about 6 months. So there's a keen focus on it across many organizations right now, really taking a look at their organizations and the makeup of their organization. Organizations, diverse organizations, it's proven, are 35% more profitable than non-diverse organizations. And so what it's done is it's created a pause for organizations to take a look at the makeup. And it's not just the makeup at the aggregate level, but it's also breaking it down from entry level to mid-level to executives, and taking a look at what does our makeup look like. So specifically from a talent acquisition perspective, how has it changed? More training, more awareness, expanding our sourcing channels to ensure that we are providing diverse slates of talent, again, at the aggregate level, not individual level. So we use technology to help that with us, but to ensure that we really are doing our due diligence when we're sourcing talent, when we're assessing and presenting that talent to managers, to ensure that we're being thoughtful. Sometimes this means it slows things down, because when you want to expand your sourcing strategy, that takes a little bit more time, but it's also the right thing to do. Another piece that we've done that might not mean anything to any of you, but identifying key profiles that we want to go after in the organization and doing comprehensive talent mapping across the globe. Some of the conversation that we had earlier tonight makes my job a lot easier and my team's job a lot easier, because we can expand our pool for talent. Because we don't care where you reside, for some jobs, not for all of them. But there's definitely a lot more awareness with a goal to increase representation across all levels. And I will also say that also includes gender parity. Many of you have probably heard a lot of organizations pre-June of this year had a really large focus, and they continue to have a large focus on achieving gender parity at the more leadership levels as well. And we're seeing some really good progress there too. Does that help? Yeah, okay, thanks for the question.
Anyone else? Don't be shy.
I'll ask a question of Sheila. Obviously in a large organization such as yours that you're involved in, some of the things that you're talking about are obviously maybe easier to put into practice and so forth. What recommendations would you have for small or mid-sized companies to engage in some of the activities and some of the important things for talent retention and career development and things of that nature? How would you adjust while those things are equally important? What recommendations would you give those smaller companies?
Okay, so I just want to make sure, Jerry, that I'm understanding you. So it's investment in your people to retain them is essentially what you're going after?
Yeah, I mean, you've talked about things about important learning and development and career enhancement and having people wanting to know that they have career paths and opportunities and so forth. That might be easier for potential employees to see in a large organization like yourself. But What about for smaller companies? How do they compete for that talent and show, and how could they do things to kind of, offset not being as large as you are?
Yeah. So thanks for the question. My answer, and I'll apologize up front because it is similar to some of the things that I've already said. But I think the first thing it starts with, Jerry, is the curiosity factor, seeking to understand what's important to the talent that you want to bring into your organization. So it actually starts with you or the business owner to define what is the talent that I want to bring in. And when I say what are those attributes? Are you looking for an inspirational leader? Are you looking for somebody who's got that fire in the belly? Are you looking for the curiosity factor because you're looking to create something new? So first identify what type of talent you're looking to bring in, and then pay attention to that talent, what's important to them. So the reason that I shared the answer that I did earlier around challenging work and learning and development and innovative pipelines is that's founded in research. That's just part of what we do every day. We listen to, we call them cohorts. It's the talent that we want to bring into our organization, as well as the talent that we want to retain. We ask, we listen, and then we take action, and we measure our progress. So I would encourage you to just first start by asking the question and truly listening, and be prepared to receive responses that you might not love. And then you make a decision. Just because somebody tells you something doesn't mean you need to change your strategy, but it's a decision that you need to make, and be thoughtful about that. So let's just assume that you've got talent that you want to retain, that really wants more learning and development so they can advance their career. Each organization is going to be different. You're right. I am blessed to work for an organization that I think has one of the best learning and development functions, quite frankly, in the world. From a small business perspective, there are lots of opportunities that you can look at from a networking perspective, as well as a small scale, especially now via video, lots of, I'll call them conferences, and I use that term really lightly because they're not, they're networking sessions and educational sessions that you can afford your team members to attend. The virtual world makes it much more affordable to do that. From a career advancement perspective, sit down and have the conversation. But then what I would also advise you to do is set those objectives, and objectives should be measurable and actionable. And you want to make sure that you're holding your employees accountable for delivering on that. Have those reviews and create those opportunities if they're delivering. Because again, your talent, if it's the right talent, is your strategic advantage. That's what separates you from the rest. That could be your differentiator. So I'm a big believer in investments make you win when you invest in your talent, or allow you to win. Does that help?
Yes, it does help. And, and my organization it's not totally small. So a lot of what you're talking about, we embrace, but I was asking more for the benefit of, somebody who might have a small, maybe not as small as Jim's family business, but maybe they have 20 employees or 25 employees. I mean, we're not AbbVie, but we have, 5,000 employees across the country. That's a little different than somebody who's running a business that has 25 to 50. And, it might not be as easy to see career opportunities and career development in that type of business. So,
yeah. I think that's fair. And I think, I always try to simplify things. I don't like complicated processes. We're people at the core, right? And we've got some basic needs. And I think one of those is to matter, which is why I always say communication, curiosity, and listening gets you pretty far. If you are really leaning in and having those conversations. And that can make all the difference, in my opinion. Anyone else? Any other questions for the panel? I'll jump in, Crystal.
All right. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I want to let you guys get back to your evenings. So thank you so much again for joining us tonight, and we'll have this recording up on our alumni page and the events page soon. So you'll definitely be able to go back and rewatch and get all the valuable information you guys heard tonight. So thank you so much for joining us, and have a good evening. Bye, everyone.
Thanks,
everyone.
bye-bye.